Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes. You guys can hear me, right?
Yep.
I
Yeah.
feel like I'm yelling. I don't know. I think is what is Avikyad. I think old age is hitting me. You ever
Welcome
get
to
the
my
feeling?
world.
You ever get a feeling like you're always yelling? Like,
I,
and I think
I
I
am always
yell.
yelling because I'm deaf.
Well, I see a couple of people in the room. Um, Broadway Joe, Graffinino, Justin Spall, H2O Plants, and myself, D from Brooklyn, Mr. D Manuel. One of the things I want to do is I'll let a few more people come in the room. Thank you, few people that are already in the room. Um, as you guys may or may not know, it's been hard for a lot of the clubs to schedule in-person meetings, and a few of the clubs that have scheduled in-person meetings have been forced to cancel them at the last minute. So what I'm trying to do is welcome all of you guys in social media to join the Facebook pages for Jersey Shore Aquarium Society, Lehigh Valley Aquarium Society, Any Seed, H2O Plants, Brooklyn Aquarium Society. Like, try to take part in the social media because right now it is the best way for us to get information out there, whether it be on books, aquariums, everything and anything. So, I'm going to be posting a lot of announcements to our sister clubs on the Brooklyn Aquarium Society Facebook page. And if I can, I try to post it. I know Justin will probably see me spamming his spamming his Facebook page. Even with his plant sales, I will pull sales that he has going on the H2O plants, and I post them to the Brooklyn Aquarium Society page. So yeah, great. Um, the second thing is, and I saw the message, I'm going to be posting events for the other aquarium societies on the NEC page as well as the
Good,
Facebook page.
good.
Because the NEC is a lot of turnover in all the clubs. A lot of the clubs are needing more participation. You don't not so much in person, but help. Help in various duties of the boards and newsletters and things of that nature. So I'll be posting events on the Brooklyn Aquarium Society page, including the Lehigh Valley has a good speaker coming up, Sue Harkley. It's going to be
Hmm,
talking about freshwater fish nutrition. That's going to be on August 20th. So if you guys are
right.
interested in that, check out the Lehigh Valley Aquarium Society webpage or their Facebook page. Um, there was something Greater City. I do not remember the date, Joe. If you remember the date of their upcoming meeting, I
Yes,
believe it is
September 1st.
so September 1st, the Greater
Yes,
City
it's gonna
Aquarium
be it's gonna
Society.
be an auction only. The whole thing is a huge auction. They're gonna be having at their normal location, which is the Queens Botanical Gardens. Um, it's gonna be fish, supplies, any kind of equipment, things of that nature. It's probably to be the first in-person um, meeting that they've had in a couple of years. Also, just as a reminder, next year is going to be their 100th birthday.
Oh,
So Greater City is gearing up for that, and I'm sure it's going to be a spectacular event. So stand by for more information on that. Also, what I'd like to do is like to make an announcement that basically came out yesterday in Amazonas Magazine of the Triple Crown Convention, which is going to be in Louisville, Kentucky. It's the American Cichlid Association, American Live Bearer Association, and the American Killifish Association, along with the what is it? The New Guinea and the Australian um, clubs are getting together and going to join in the hosting of this spectacular event. As you well know, they're more interested in the invested in the rainbow fish as a group more than anything else. So it's going to be a huge event. It's going to be in Louisville, Kentucky, at the East Marriott Hotel in Louisville. It's going to be July 27th through the 31st. It's a 5-day event. So be prepared to have lots of barrels of water so you can bring home fish and plants, and that probably don't have coral there. So you saltwater guys may be out of that, but for your freshwater freaks, I mean that's going to be the show of the century so far. That's for sure.
And I've been looking at their website. I'm going to post a link to their website a little later on our Facebook page. Also, check out the Brooklyn Aquarium Society forum because I'm trying to shoot out as much information as I can over multiple venues. But there is a large following to that Aquarium Society. So it looks like, we're a hell or high water. There's going to be a good turnout for that. And also the greater city, always a good turnout for their auctions. I've been working with them with the bandwidth, so they're going to stream it and they're going to be in person. So we're working on that, trying to give people as much good news as possible.
Right.
And yeah, that aquarium, that convention is going to be streaming worldwide. I see some people are flying in for that. So
oh yeah, that's huge. That's going to be probably the biggest in the world.
That's
for 2022. It's also, most countries, as you well know, are shut down because of the pandemic. So hopefully this will be over and everybody be able to fly in without a problem and enjoy the festivities in Louisville. It's going to be great. Also, I would like to mention North Jersey Aquarium Society is seeking to have their first in-person meeting. I believe it's going to be September 18th at the library in Clarks, New Jersey. So I'm inviting everybody out to go to that. That's going to be an opening door for the last 2 years event. So that should be a lot of fun as well. Finally, be able to move our fish. Isn't that great?
Man, I know quite a few of you have been crying. There are breeders out there. I know. My man D of New York Gold has like 10,000 angelfish he's breeding. He's got like 10,000 angelfish. I got fish filling up I got plants. I'm gonna have to send them to Justin. I got plants overflowing in my backyard. I saw 50 birds in my backyard trying to get into the pond.
Oh wow!
I came in, flew all over the place. It looked like a scene from Jurassic Park. So yeah, we're hoping to help you guys move a lot of the fish, plants, even the coral. I mean, they're not going to say no. You can't bring coral. I mean, if you want to come to these events and things. So
also, I believe the Brooklyn Aquarium Society is going to be having an online auction again in September. Exactly what the date is, I don't think we have solidified that yet, but stay tuned for that. I think you're going to enjoy another one of our online events. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
trying to help any way we can.
Oh man, and if you haven't been checking out the Facebook page, Facebook Marketplace, and the website, I've been posting tanks. We haven't been meeting in person, but I've been posting tanks for sale. We had 3 of them sell, a 30. I got 55. I believe we have a 90 coming, 90-gallon tank. I got a lot of stuff that I've been moving just because we're not meeting in person. I'm posting them on the Facebook page. So if you guys are looking for tanks and stuff, then you better be checking out the Facebook page for updates. Brooklyn Aquarium Society on Facebook. Yeah, shameless plug. I'm no stranger to a shameless plug. But
you're not shy.
No, I'm not shy. That's what my mother said. But without talking you guys to death, Justin is a friend of the club, has attended many meetings. I feel like we've known him from the beginning. We've kind of grown around him growing and the plants. I've learned more from Justin in like that one meeting that I actually kept some plants alive. Yeah. I definitely have to tell you that this is going to be a big question and answer thing as well. So we got a few people that are watching now. There's going to be a giveaway. We'll say more about that later. But wisteria and a few other plants that I had lost total hope for. Like I see a little peeking out, and I was like, "Thanks, Justin." Like if you can hear me from Brooklyn, I was like, "Thanks, Justin." Like it peeked out, so proud of it. The crypts, not even wisteria. I'm talking about wisteria. I mean the cryptocorna. I could never get it to actually get full. It would come melt, and like burn my eyes off. But yeah, so if you guys have questions, post them in the comments here. I'm checking questions. I got like 15 devices here. You know how I do it. I got this here. I got that there. I got 50 things. I'm like, I'm gonna have Thanos snapping his fingers a minute and popping plants out of my ears. But yeah, Justin Spalls of HCOplants.com. I'll put that in the notes there so you guys can check it out. How long have you been out there now? It's been a few years now.
What in the hobby or just out in Jersey
Down
where I
in
am now?
Jersey. I know you've been in a hobby for
Uh, yeah, I think it's got to be about 4 years maybe. My daughter's 3, and we moved here a year before she was born. So yeah, so it would probably be about 4 going on 5 years.
now. How long have you been in a hobby?
I want to say maybe about 7, going on 7 years. So a
Okay.
little bit longer than that. It
Mhm.
actually, the hobby kind of influenced me having to move because my landlord did not like the idea of all these aquariums in my apartment. So that made me have to move sooner rather than later. So yeah,
Show me a landlord that loves aquariums.
I know, right? You would think they'd be
One
all
that
right.
has their own.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
right.
I lucked out because when I had the apartment, my super actually had a 150-gallon aquarium in his living room. So I was like, I live on the 6th floor. Could I put that on the floor? Will it fall down to the neighbor's apartment underneath? He's like, no, man, no, put it in, put it in, put it in. So
Well,
yeah,
believe it or not, a house construction is meant to hold weight. So I
Yeah,
mean, as long as
true.
you don't have 1,000 pounds in like one little circle area, you're good.
Right.
oh
Yeah.
man. Well, and just so in case people don't get shocked, Joe probably you're gonna have to leave a little early. So if you see him disappear, poof, he's a genie. Remember the genie from Aladdin? That's his role right now. He's gonna poof.
But
So make
hopefully
your
I'll be
wish now.
back. I should be back before it's over.
Yeah. So
I have
make
to
your
do a quick
wishes now.
pickup.
All right. So yeah, this is gonna be an open discussion. Justin has the magnificent plant room behind you. I'll turn it over. I can talk you to death. So jump in at any time, man, and just let's talk about what we're gonna do tonight.
All right, yeah. Just one thing, you'll keep track of questions for me, and then we'll
I'm
go.
doing it.
All right, at the end, because I mean, I don't, I'm going to be talking, and I'm probably not going to be able to be seeing all the questions come up. So, um, no, what I wanted to talk about in my last presentation with the group, I discussed on kind of the basic of what tanks require to grow plants, such as substrate, fertilizer, lighting, that kind of thing. Today, since obviously we're remote, I have the full arsenal of plants behind me, and I picked out some plants I want to kind of showcase, show some different things about them. But I want to touch just briefly on my last presentation, kind of what we had discussed, and and just the basics. So if you have any new people here watching, they get the basics down. So essentially, when it comes to planted aquariums, your most important thing is going to be lighting above anything else. When you first set up a tank, you want to probably put the most money you can into getting a good lighting as opposed to really good substrate or CO2 or nutrients, because the light is really going to determine your growth and how well your plants do over time. So, and by a good light, I don't mean a very expensive light. You can find good lights for 20, 30, $40. It doesn't need to be super expensive. Depending on the tank, if you have a bigger tank like a 75-gallon, 125-gallon, then you're talking maybe a couple $100 for a good light because it's so big. But if you have a 10-gallon tank, 20, $30 will get you a decent light. You just have to look for ones made specifically for planted aquariums. So once you have your good light determined, your next thing that you would want to get is a good substrate. You can grow plants in gravel. You can grow them in sand. I actually have here with me to show you guys some root tabs that we sell. And what's nice about these is if you do have gravel or sand substrate, you could put these little guys inside of your substrate. You use tweezers, put them all the way down in there, and that injects a little bit of dirt down in there and gives your plants food to grow. But you can grow them without any of that. I have a 40-gallon on the other side of the room here that it used to be a goldfish tank, and it is literally just white sand, and I have a bunch of valves growing in it. And they're growing fine. I don't fertilize. I don't add anything into the substrate. It's just white sand and valves, and they're growing great. I also have crenums in there that are doing fantastic. Keep in mind, I'm not fertilizing at all, except for the pleco in there that I feed every so often. That does pretty well. So substrate, lighting, those are the two main things. A lot of people bring up CO2. I'm not a big believer in CO2. When I first got into planted aquariums, I didn't have CO2. Then I read all the benefits to it, and I started doing CO2. And then I quickly realized it was a waste. It caused more issues than helped. And I wound up killing my fish a couple times. So I I pretty much determined that the benefits weren't worth the pain of having to deal with all that. So I eventually got rid of CO2, and now all my tanks have no CO2. I don't run CO2 in anything, and that's not to say CO2 isn't beneficial. You can
Now,
definitely use CO2.
I was going to ask you about that because I kind of remember that journey. Like when you set up that
Yeah,
huge tank and set up the
yeah,
CO2, I actually have the tank here. But in regards to setting up no CO2 and then using the inert substrate, like just sand, because that
right.
is like one of the questions that I got yesterday on the Facebook page. How do you feel about dirt versus the inert sand, since you say you're doing so well with the sand and there's no nutrient value in the sand, so it's just kind of relying on the water
Right.
column?
Yeah, it's relying on the water column. It's relying on the fish waste, whatever the fish produce. It's relying on the snails that I have in there that are constantly turning over the sand. I have Malaysian trumpet snails, which if you don't have them, you need to get them. Usually people give them away for free. Sometimes they'll come in on some plants. They're great. Some people don't like them because they are very notorious for overbreeding, but they're great for sand substrates or dirt substrates, either one. But in regards to using dirt in an aquarium, so I know a lot of people and a lot of old timers, definitely that have been in the hobby a long time, will have used dirt at some point. And dirt's definitely good, but I don't like it because of the mess that it makes. So I prefer something like an aqua soil, either a ADA aqua soil. We sell the Tropica aqua soil, which I think is actually superior to it. And a lot of fellow aquascapers that I've talked to, it's either ADA or Tropica. Pretty much, there isn't anything else that they would recommend. But fluval stratum is also a good one, especially if you have shrimp, because there's no nitrogen or no ammonia spike or nitrogen spike with that. And basically, the way you got to think of a good substrate like ADA aqua soil or Tropico or any of them really is they act as a sponge. And so what that does is gravel, you got to picture is just like rocks. It has no pores, nothing for it to hold on to anything. Usually has smooth surfaces, so all the nutrients are lost in the water column essentially. What aqua soil or anything that's specifically designed for aquarium plants, they're made out of clay or other minerals that hold it together. And what that acts as is like a sponge. So if you picture this, I mean, it's a cloth, but picture this as a sponge. If you dip this in water, it's going to be soaking wet. So the water is essentially the nutrients when you think about this in a metaphorical state. This is the gravel. The water is the nutrients. It sucks it up, and then it holds on to it. And then what can happen is the roots, there's this, it's called a cation exchange. It's a little technical, but basically the roots smell the nutrients inside of each particle of sand, of substrate or dirt or whatever, and they latch onto it, and then they suck it out through basically science. Science does it. It exchanges protons, neutrons, all that stuff to absorb the nutrients, and that's why like good substrate does help, but it's not absolutely needed. It all is going to depend on the plants that you're trying to grow. If you're trying to grow really easy plants like vows, or like I have this red tiger lotus here, if you're trying to grow red tiger lotus, they don't need substrate. They would love it. All plants would love the substrate, but they don't absolutely need it.
Oh, now that's interesting you say that, because that was the other thing. Tiger lotus and what we usually buy as water lilies. I have such conflicting information on how to grow those. Some people say to just sit it in the water. Some people say to put it in peat moss. Some people say to put it in a pot and put that in the tank. I did all of those and I just lucked out and had it grow in that in the dirt. In the dirted tank, I actually put a rock over it.
Mm.
And when I didn't think about it anymore, it bloomed. But I had
Yeah.
no idea if it was just blind luck or dumb luck, or what is the proper way to get those to grow.
Well, when it comes to aquarium plants, I believe there is no one surefire way. I think people can have different methods of doing things and have success. Plants are very adaptable to their environment. That's how they survived on this planet for as long as they have. They, figure out how to grow in certain conditions, maybe not the best or ideal conditions, but particularly what you're asking is about bulb plants, because tiger lotus or red or aquarium lilies or any of the pongitons or Madagascar lace, those are all bulb plants. And what that means is they have a central bulb. Let me see if I have I don't know if this is going to show up too well, but if you look at this pot right here, so there's a little black bulb there. This is a small red tiger lotus. This one just came in. And you can see the little bulb there. And basically that bulb holds all the nutrients, all the plant DNA for it to continue to sprout. What usually can happen with bulb plants, and particularly red tiger lotus or lilies, is this entire leaf mass can come dislodged and completely float away or die back. But as long as the bulb stays intact and not mushy or doesn't develop any fungus, it'll regrow year after year. Now, there are some instances, and it really is going to depend from plant to tank condition and all that and season, is sometimes what people recommend is you take the bulb out of the aquarium when it starts to die back. So when you notice if you have like 15, 20 leaves coming off your lily or your lotus or your epongatons, you see the leaves starting to die back a bit. You take that bulb out of the aquarium. You put it in like a damp, not soaked in wet, but just damp sand inside of like a bag and kind of close it up and then stick it in a cool, dark place for like 2 or 3 months. And basically that's because of seasonality. You have to realize that when plants are inside your aquariums, with the exception of little temperature changes in your house, they don't experience seasons the way they would in the wild. So most plants, when it comes to winter and summer and spring and fall, they do different things. A lot of plants will die back, perennials will die back, and eventually come back when the weather is more ideal for them. And they all have that cue. So bulb plants still have that cue. Even though they're in your tank, they kind of have their own internal clock. They know like, okay, it should be the time that I need to go back into my bulb to last until next season because it may get too cold for me to survive or whatever. And there's little cues. It could be the sudden drop in temperature in your tank, even by like 1 or 2 degrees, that'll trigger it. And that's some cases of what you would do. You would pull out the bulb. But in most cases, the plants could still survive throughout that, that seasonality factor. Like if you just leave it in your tank, there's a good chance it'll come back. But sometimes they do go bad if they just get left alone and nothing happens to them.
So now, okay, with that being said, have you ever, and I know, so now you've opened your own operation and grown your own plants, but I know you're also a hobbyist before
Right.
you grew out your whole business. Now, how can you tell? And it's like a shot in the dark. You buy a bulb in a pack. How do you know that bulb is any good? Like,
So
you don't know how long they've had it. You don't know if it's dried out. That's always been my hesitation with buying bulbs.
So we learned very early on when I started selling plants that we didn't want to buy unsprouted bulbs, because usually you could buy 3 bulbs. Let's just say you're buying one off the store shelf in your local pet store. They usually come in like 3 packs. You don't know. You can't really know which ones are gonna sprout. There are some signs that you could see if it's any good or not at the time of purchase to make sure like you stand the best chance of them sprouting, but there's always a chance that they don't sprout. So what you would typically be looking for on the bulbs in the baggie is any sort of mold, white growth, anything like that. And also you want to feel them. You want to kind of pinch them and see if they're mushy. If it's mushy to the point where like you could just squeeze it and it completely collapses on itself, it's no good. Those are 2 signs that the bulbs are no good. And then you stand, after you rule out those 2 factors, the chances are that they'll sprout are good. You'll probably at least get 1, but it's not always the case. And that's why we don't particularly sell unsprouted bulbs. We at least make sure they have 2 or 3 leaves before they go out, because we know even if you get this plant in the mail and the leaves fall off or they die during transit, we know that this bulb has sprouted. So we know it'll continue to sprout at least for the next several months. Over the course of years, we don't know. That's all going to depend on that seasonality thing and how it gets all affected. But yeah.
Okay.
I think this.
There you go. Steve's
Can you hear me
up.
now?
I got you.
Okay, it was muted. I bought a lily actually recently on Amazon. My wife picked it up from my pond outside, and like you said, it was very soft. It's been in the water now about a week and a half, and it doesn't look like it's coming out at all. I think it's just gone, But it comes with like a plastic, like a mesh around it. Are you supposed to take that mesh off, or should you leave the mesh on when you plant it?
I think the mesh is there to prevent it from touching wetness while it's in its packaging. I think that's what they use that for. So I would think that you're supposed to take that off. I've
take that
never
off.
seen it with the mesh, but that would make sense to me that it would probably be in there to
I've seen
keep
them in the
it.
stores with that big mesh
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a little. It's like a little dry, some kind of material around it.
It's like a plastic chicken wire is what it is, almost
Yeah.
like
Oh,
like
okay.
that. I've had lilies in my pond all the time, water lilies, and my last one I had for 5 or 6 years before it finally didn't come back this year. And usually every year I cut it and I drop it in the
Right.
deep end. And I don't know, is that good too, or should you be taking that bulb in also, or?
So when it comes to water lilies for ponds and stuff, they actually recommend you take them out, and kind of the same process with the
Freeze 'em.
aquarium lilies is you store them in cool, dark places after they have had time to dry out, because you don't want them freezing over. They are highly susceptible to freezing temperatures, especially up here.
So
Oh,
at the end
okay.
of the year, you're cutting it back, take the bulb out, put it the same
Yeah.
in that moist soil, like you're saying,
Yep.
and then seal the
then-
bag, and put it like in the garage in a dark spot.
Yeah, but not so much where there's so much water in it. Like it should be
I
damp
know
to
you mean,
the
just a little
touch, but
moist.
a little moist, but not soaking wet.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Nano Aquarium guy says the same thing. He said it had some bulbs go bad and smell, and I think I ran into that. Like if you leave them in one spot and they kind of dry rot where they get squishy.
Yep.
It's like they hollow out from the inside, and when you
Yep.
take them out, you definitely smell them. It's like an old
Yeah.
walnut type
Right.
of smell.
Yeah.
But
not all bulbs that smell do go bad. Just it sometimes could just be a bacteria on the outside of the bulb that's causing it. That may not be killing the plant. So we do have some instances when we pull out a plant, it is stinky, but that's just kind of sometimes the bulb is fine, it's completely intact. It's just the bacteria films on it. But bad bulbs do smell. So if you do have, that is another way to tell.
And he also asks, which bulb plant do you think is the best looking flower? I haven't had mine flower yet. I had it send out huge leaves, but not a good flower.
So I actually have a pretty big one here. This is Ulvaceous. Hopefully I don't break the flower. I wanted to show you guys. This one's actually got 2 flowers going on. This one's huge. These are the flowers on this one. They almost look like little octopus tentacles that come out. There's 2 of them on here. And these are really pretty. They'll last for a couple days and then eventually they'll die back. You could actually cross-pollinate these, get seeds if you wanted to, and do all that. I've never done it, but I know people that have. And and this is a Ulvaceous, a Panchaton Ulvaceous plant. It has a bulb. It's inside the pot, But you can see these get big. This is, if I had to take a guess, probably about 18 inches or so, 20 inches.
That's big. That's a big one.
And they get bigger. This is not full size. These will continue to grow. This is actually the biggest one we had in the tank, and I noticed it was flowering, so I wanted to show you guys. But yeah, the flowering is a cool thing to see. It's also a sign that is typically when the plant will die back for that seasonality. When plants go to flower, that's usually towards the end of their life cycle. So that's another indicator that your plant may be looking for that, for you to remove it from its environment and put it in, that dryish sand or damp sand and, allow it to rest. Because once it's flowered, it's basically saying, all right, I've lived out my life cycle here. Let me put my offspring into the world, and then I'll go back into my shell until the next season to do it all over again. That's kind of how plants work. Usually when they're flowering, you're going to see some dieback. If you have flowers in the garden, you have roses, you have all that stuff, unless they're ones that sprout like throughout all seasons. Typically, if they're just the regular natural variety that haven't been like genetically engineered or crossbred to do specific things, that's what they'll do. Like peonies is a perfect example. If anybody has experience with peonies,
we had that, yeah.
Yeah, my wife's favorite flower. Once, they bloom early in the spring, but once they bloom, that's it. They don't really grow.
They're beautiful, big, but just like it's a short time, yeah.
Yep. It's once that
it's just a green bush after that.
Yeah, then it's just a green bush, and then eventually they start to look ragged, and you cut them back. But they're beautiful for a very short amount of time. So
we're talking about the lilies before, the water lilies. My water lily I had probably for a year, and I said, this thing's not flowering. Why is this not flowering? My neighbor comes over one day and shows me a picture. This beautiful flower. I said, how is that? He goes, it flowers every morning at about 6 o'clock, only for an hour or two, and then closes back up. I never knew it was like this. So it only does it in the very early morning.
I planted what I think is morning glory. I didn't know, but my the person that owned the house before me had scattered this thing. And I kept seeing that flower open up, it'd be blue, and then it would be green. And I was like, wait a minute, maybe I'm drinking or something. Like, where is the flower going? And I didn't realize
You would
that
think when it
had
flowers,
been,
it would stay that. But that's, some
no,
plants are
it
like
just
that. Yeah.
closes and it opens out. I
There's
thought it was
lilies that
out of-
only bloom at night. There's lilies that bloom in the morning.
Yep.
I never knew that.
And there's cactus that do the same thing. There's a what is the name of it? I can't think of the name of it, but it's a cactus
that
in
has
the
that one
desert.
flower on the side, as one white flower that pops up.
Oh,
Yeah.
the Christmas cactus.
Oh,
What
No,
is that?
well,
no,
no,
is that it?
not Christmas cactus. It's one that's a wild variety, but it grows in the desert, and when it only opens at night, or only for a certain amount of time.
Okay.
But
Oh,
one thing,
man.
going back to your water lilies, one way to really get them to sprout is use these root tabs, or any root tabs. You put these in at the beginning.
I do put the vitamins in, I guess what you want to call them in there. I think it's
Yeah.
called something tabs. I just bought two, and I put them in the dirt. Usually at the beginning of the year, I'll put them in. Maybe twice a season, I'll put them in.
Yeah. Anytime you do pond water lilies or anything like that, root tabs, and that's not even just me trying to sell root tabs. That is how you get them to flower. The more energy they have at the beginning of the season, the more flowers they're going to produce.
And that is, yeah. And I used to use an aquatic soil because regular soil in a pond, it's fine if it stays still, but when the koi knock the pot over and the dirt goes all over, it makes a mess. So they had this one aquatic soil, and I can't remember the brand, but it's more like pebbles. And it wasn't like a dirt.
Oh,
now you can't
rounded
find it
ones?
any place. So now the last time I bought this dirt again, and it's fine, but you got to put the pot down nice and easy. If you disturb it, next thing it goes all over the place. And
Well, I put the pot down. I put the pot down, and I took a soil. I mixed it with sand, and I used that on top, and it's been working the last 3 years.
put the sand on top to pack it down. You mean?
I mix it with the sand on the top, and then I pack it down. And the sand, you got to wet the sand, kind of like.
Well,
Play-Doh,
I
wet
usually
it.
soak the soil before I use it. I soak it
then
for like a day just to make sure, because if you just put it in dry, it just goes all over the place.
I think.
But
Joe
I never
gave me with the
realized
peat
that you
moss,
put
'cause
sand on
that and
top
the-
of it.
That and the peat moss, I could never get quite right until he told me to soak it for a few days.
Peat moss is
soak it-
okay in the ponds too.
I put that. I mix that with the soil. I mix that with the soil.
You could
and
also
they grow
do
really
gravel
fast.
too. You could do
gravel on
gravel
top
too
of-
on top of the pond.
I'm so afraid of putting different things like peat moss. I'm in the ponds. I don't know if it's going to affect the fish or what. I'm always leery. I don't even put the salt anymore because I know the salt is not great for plants either. Put too much salt. I always used to put.
If you have a big enough water column, like if you have like 100+ gallons, a little bit of peat moss is
about 400 to 500. Let's say it's about 400.
Yeah, so you're going to be fine because the peat moss, you're not covering the whole thing in peat moss. You only have a little bit in there. It should be fine.
Right.
And now we got a Facebook user that kind of asked a question along those lines. He said, if CO2, and we're going to focus still on tanks, we got ponds, tanks, and other forms that you're growing these plants. If CO2 is not being used, what chemicals should be tested for optimal growth, or used or treated for optimal growth? Because there's a mirage of chemicals out there.
Yes,
that's
right. Like coral, there's a million things they'll tell you need. Do you really need them?
I was just looking at our storage area and all the chemicals. I was like, it's overwhelming. Each plant, like some plants need this, some plants need that. I mean, how do you know? What do you use?
So this is the way I'd approach it. If you're a newbie into plants and you're kind of just starting out, you don't need to worry about all that stuff. It's like if you had a car, right? You're just driving a car. You're not doing anything special. And if you wanted to be a tuner and you wanted to learn the insides and outs of a car, you would learn how to tune the car and do all the different things with different variable timings and, changing out parts and all that. It's kind of the same thing with nutrients. Plants do need nutrients. We have these all-in-one fertilizers that come with a pump top that make it easy for people to dose. And then there's people that do the dry fertilizer. I actually have bags of it behind me because I used to use that. And then there's ways to test for all these different metrics, how much nitrogen, how much potassium, how much phosphorus, iron, all these things. But when it comes down to it, if you're just doing regular basic plants, you're not trying to do these crazy, in-depth, like Ludwigia whites or some of these hygrophilia, chia things that they're coming out with now. These really just fancy plants that need all these specific metrics to grow. Most of the time, the plants are going to get by just fine. We don't typically dose that much in any of these tanks. We just kind of let them go and do their own thing. Like the one tank that I was talking about with the valves, I literally don't do anything. I feed the fish and that's it. I don't do water changes. I don't gravel vac. It literally just grows valves. That's all it does. So
Well,
there.
Also,
It
if you
all
get them from
depends
a
on how
good
involved.
source, like you got to also get your plants from a good source too. I mean, I know you bring in your plants and you're keeping them and you're growing them up. They're not just schlepping away in a box, throwing them on the shelf. A
Yeah.
lot of these plants in the big box stores are schlepped all around. They're in the basement, or you don't know how long they've been traveling. So I guess you got to get them
Yeah.
from a good source.
It's like
Yeah, it helps.
live fish, same thing, right?
Yeah,
There's a
it
difference
helps. Like,
going to
you're right. A lot of places do what they call a drop and ship method. Basically, they get it in and then they ship it out. We primarily have these plants at least in our tanks for a week, and we've narrowed it down. Like, I have so many more species of plants that I could carry, but I know that how they transition in at least in our tanks. They may do fine for other people across the U.S., but like for us, we get certain plants in and they just melt back completely to nothing. So it's a waste of my money. It's a waste of my time to have those plants. So I just don't stock them. I only stock the plants that I know once they get here, they may melt a little bit. They'll start to transition, and then I can ship them out once they've done their little bit of melting and whatnot. And they're back to like an acceptable state that once they arrive, they should be able to thrive, pending any shipping catastrophes that do happen on several occasions throughout the week. But yeah, so having a good source for plants, somebody that isn't just getting them and shipping them, is a good thing, which not a lot of people are doing anymore. But your big box stores, they, not to put them down, but sometimes they don't really know what's going on with their plants. They just get them in and you take your risk.
They don't know what's going on in a lot of things when you go into those big stores.
They go from one bag to the other bag to your tank.
Exactly.
With snails.
Exactly.
Half the time
half of the time you don't even know if
you
they're
ask them a question,
they
they stare at you, because usually there's young kids at work and they don't really know, and
Yeah.
they make a minimum wage, I guess, and they're not really experienced. That's the difference when you go to a place like, let's say, Absolute Fish, where he trains everybody and he has everybody in there knows what they're doing. And you go in these big stores, like you said, you may get a buy in the box store, the big box stores, but sometimes you suffer in quality.
Yeah.
Now, okay, I don't want to miss a question. I just forgot what it was. Okay, lighting. If you have a fish room that has several aquariums that have plants, is it better to have LED ceiling lights or have individual lights over each tank? Now, Justin has multiple tanks right behind him. How do you address that?
Each tank has its own light. Now, granted, if you had two tanks side by side, you could use one light across the top of all of them. We have them separated, so we can't quite do that. But if you had, say, 2 10-gallons, we have a section in the corner over there that has 4 10-gallon tanks side by side, and we have one strip light straight across them. But you can't just use like an overhead light like I have over here hanging down. You need light directly on top of the aquarium. The reason is as light travels through water, it gets less and less and less effective to reach the plants. What's that?
The par value drops as you go deeper in the water.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the par value drops. It's what's a good way to phrase it? It's like if you're ever driving down a foggy road and you have your headlights on your car at night, it kind of disperses the light. That's the best analogy that I think I could give. Is the more water you have, the more your light is dispersed, and the less effective it is for it to reach the bottom of the tank. And that's ideal. You want the best value of light reaching the bottom of the tank, because if you don't have good light at the bottom, the plants actually start to die from the bottom up. Because the top of the plants are getting the best lighting because they're the closest to the light, but the bottom of them is now being shadowed. So that's why.
So it's not absorbing for the whole plant. Every part of the plant has to absorb. You're saying?
Yeah. Each leaf, like while a plant and all of its leaves work together in unison, if there's a leaf underneath somewhere, that's why if you ever look at a tree, trees don't typically have leaves underneath their trunk. It's all at the top because that's where the most light is.
Yeah. Well, any of us that keep. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Any of us that keep coral know the same thing. If some coral's on top of the corals and it's not getting light underneath, the corals will die off. And I've seen that before many times. You know, why is it not growing? And then you move it to another spot, and all of a sudden it starts growing again.
Well, it's
Exactly,
funny
yeah,
also
that's
because we put a lot of science. Steve and I and Joe, we both keep saltwater reefs and we keep erect freshwater aquariums. There's so much science put into lighting in saltwater aquariums, but nobody ever talks about par. I've never heard anybody talk about par in growing plants.
Yeah.
And light,
well,
the light, we talk
yeah.
about spectrum, we talk about the K value in the freshwater side, but we talk about par in the saltwater side.
Well, the reason for that is corals are not plants; they're living organisms, and they have much strict requirements than plants do.
Absolutely.
All the aquarium plants that we have in our aquariums are basically weeds. That's all they are, for
Yeah.
the most part. And if they can survive off whatever you give them, they're going to. Now, yeah, there are some plants that are much harder to grow than others that need an intense amount of light. In my last presentation for the group, I touched on that briefly, but basically we're giving our aquariums like 1/1000th of the light that the sun would naturally
Of course.
provide to them outside, So the fact that the ones that do grow are usually the least demanding plants out there, because you could pick a ton of plants from rivers and streams or whatever, and not all of them will work in an aquarium because they just have too high of light requirements. But most of the ones that you can find in your common aquarium store or online have been selected to grow in aquariums, and typically will, without all those lighting values and all that. And yeah, there's people that go in depth with the par and the spectrum and the right K value and all that. And yes, yet again, with the nutrients, you could go and dig further deep into that hole. But for the majority of people that keep aquariums, that's like 5% of the entire aquarium, hobby is that. The rest of us just want plants that will grow in our tanks, and you can literally, pick 10 different plants, put them all into your tank. 5 of them grow, great, grow those 5. Don't worry about the 5 that die.
Stay away from the other 5.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. I'm like, listen, you're better off, instead of buying 6 of one particular plant, buy 6 different plants, and if 4 or 5 of them grow and 1 dies, don't worry about
Yeah,
the one that died.
But if
Focus
they're
on
like
the one.
us saltwater guys like David, if you kill
Oh
something, you
man,
want to know why,
you're
and you try
determined to
again,
make
and you try until you
Yeah.
get it right.
you ain't
know,
lying.
I mean, look,
Trust
I've had
me,
situations where coral will not grow. Move it to another spot with a little different flow, a little different light, and then all of a sudden it grows. And you're like, it's in the same tank. But
Oh
it's just the
man,
way it
it's
is,
it's
that
nuts.
that could be the same with plants too. Plants, you could literally have a plant in the back of your tank. You bring it to the front, it's fine. It's all
Right.
depending on
Right.
where it is in the tank with the light and all that. That's why I
But like
say
you said,
lighting is the most important.
we're trying to mimic something that's in a natural environment in huge bodies of water. I don't care if you got a 500-gallon tank in your house. That's a drop in the bucket to where they're from. And
Yeah,
there's no way that you can compete with the light from the sun, whether it's
exactly.
coral or whether it's plants and things. So we're trying to mimic, and you try to get it. And like with us with coral, there's some corals you should never put in a tank because they just will not grow. And they're
Right.
impossible, some things, and others will grow like weeds.
Well,
Yep.
I've been experimenting with that very topic right there because I'm growing a few immersed plants. I've been experimenting with growing herbs in the tank. I'm growing mint in the tank,
Really?
and I'm growing some basil.
Yep.
As long as it's coming
Underwater, I
out
meant
of
this
the
stuff,
water,
really?
I grow it
Yep.
out of the water.
Oh,
Yeah.
they're
Just
out of the water.
enough.
Okay.
I have so much mint; it's actually grown out of the
Well,
tank.
that's a weed. Mint grows like crazy.
But
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's interesting because we've been growing pothos for years. Pothos is probably the go-to plant, nutrient
Mhm.
export. But there are many household plants that are very popular. And I don't know if you're doing that. I think you were doing that, Justin, before. And when you had the cube upstairs, you
Yeah.
were growing some plants out and in and experimenting with that. How did that
Yeah.
go?
I still have the tank, but unfortunately, I've been so busy that it's just become a mess. I actually have to take it down because it's just my wife's tired of seeing it, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I don't have time to maintain it. There's no fish in it. It was literally just a plant experiment of mine. So I'm not too worried about it. It's just plants growing in there. But yeah, another good plant that you can grow out of the water like that not many people know about is sweet potato vine.
Oh, okay. If you
Yeah.
can control. Well, that has to come up too, right? You can't just drop the sweet
No, yeah, you
potato
can
in.
only the roots. You can put the stem in the water and allow the roots to come down, and then the leaves will just kind of grow like pothos does. And
Yeah,
they're
and there's
you can get them in bright green or like a lime green color or purple. There's a purple variant too. That's pretty
probably
cool.
plenty of nutrients in the thing from the fish and stuff with the fish waste and
Oh
whatever.
yeah,
The water's probably
and as long as you're not putting chemicals in your water, if you're growing stuff like mint or basil is another one that you could do. Like just
yeah.
leave that. You
Basil, I
know.
have.
I do
Yeah.
that with my pond. I water my plants in the backyard of my pond and stuff, whatever I have, you know.
Yeah.
Tell you,
I actually want to build. We're probably going to move out of this house soon. In my next house that I buy, I want to have a pond. And what I want to do is I'm going to have the filtration that has like an overhead piping that goes over vegetable garden that just waters it automatically on like a
I've seen
timer.
something like that. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you a quick
Try
story
it.
one time where I used to work one time, one of my Coney Island, and they just put new bushes all along the tree. And I had a small 20-gallon tank in the maintenance shop. So when I used to do the water change, I used to dump it on the plants. And the boss come in one day and started yelling at me. I just put those plants. What are you doing? I said, go look outside. The only plants that were living, the ones that I was watering, all the other ones were dying all along the bushes. He spent thousands of dollars in about 100 foot of bushes. 3 bushes were living, the ones that I were pouring the water on from the fish tank from the Oscars I had in there.
Oh my
I
god.
just
Yeah,
saw.
the
I just
nutrients.
saw those. Some things like that. One of the guys I work with is the groundskeeper, and he's been killing plants. He's watering them in the middle of the day. It's like a 90 degrees outside. He's
Oh
spraying
god.
them,
Yeah.
and I'm like, don't do that. But
I got my water going on
Right.
5:30 in the morning before the sun comes
Yep.
up.
That's the best time to water. Early
Yeah.
in the morning. You can't water them at night or even midday. It's not advice.
Right.
So now I saw a question from a Facebook user, and it's very broad, but I want to put it up there because he says it's Ludwigia garden. One day was fine, leaves bright and green and red, and over then a period of 2 days lost all the leaves and only one stem left. I've seen that many times. I've seen that in just doing a water change, actually. Like some people say they do a water change right out of the tap. I do a water change and I tested the water, tested it, and done all kind of things. But it sounds similar to what this guy is saying, like just one stem left, and he's like, "What am I doing wrong?" But
Yeah. So much like fish, plants don't like big changes in water parameters and temperatures or anything like that. And it kind of also touches back to the seasonality that I talked about. Both plants aren't the only ones that go through seasonality. All plants can go through seasonality. So the slightest change in temperature could all of a sudden trigger a genetic marker in the plant to be like, oh, it's winter. I need to start, dying back or whatever it is.
Turn them
Like
off.
that could happen. In that particular case, I'm not sure, but kind of the way I do things, or the philosophy I have around water changes is less is more. So I know a lot of people, they say do 50% water changes weekly and all that. I don't like to do that. I say like 10 to 20% at most. And that way you have the smallest amount of change possible in the tank while taking care of the ammonia and the nitrogen and all that. But if you have enough plants in your tank, you really don't need to do that many water changes or that much of water changes. Like you don't have to do 50% if you have a fully planted tank. You could get away with 5%, 10%, just replenish kind of the evaporation, and every once in a while you could do a smaller, water change that pulls out more. But Ludwigias in particular do have a thing that happens with them that they melt from the bottom up. And I don't know if this is that particular situation. It kind of doesn't sound like it, but what'll happen is when you first get plants in and they either come bunched up or I'll show you here. So they could come bunched up in a weight like this. So they have like this lead weight around it and they're bunched up like this, or they come in a pot like this, and there's multiple stems in here. The best thing you can do is separate them. So you take, you take this weight off and you plant these inches apart from one another, not on top of each other. Same thing with the potted plants. You would open up the rock wool that's in here and you would separate each stem and plant them at least an inch or two apart from one another.
Do you reuse the lead weights, or you dump those?
The lead weight you could reuse for something if you had like say a goldfish tank and wanted to like stick plants in there. They're good to like weigh down like swords or bulb plants. It'll help keep them down. You know, the lead weight is harmless to aquariums, so it's just a matter of can you find a use for them.
Okay.
So kind of
Wow.
with that though is you want to plant the plants further away from each other. They don't want to be directly next to each other. And the reason is if one plant out of, let's say you have 10 stems from the same plant and one of those stems starts to rot and it's touching the other ones, it'll
Rots the other one.
it'll automatically trigger the other
Okay.
ones to do the same thing. So what you want to do is you want to separate them. And also when you get plants in, especially potted plants, typically stem plants will start rotting because they're close to each other in that rock wall. It's not an ideal growing situation or media. It's just what we have to grow them in. So typically what we do is when we pick the plants to ship out, we'll check, you know, the bottoms of the plants, make sure they're not rotting. If they are, we'll trim them back, replant them in the pot, and then there you go, they're good. But I recommend that when you get the plants, especially stem plants, you check the bottoms of the plant. If they're mushy, you know, at the bottom 1 inch or so, you trim about a half an inch above that. And then you plant them. You don't plant the mushy part because it's just going to continue to rot up the
It'll just rot more.
Wow, I've been doing
Yeah.
that wrong for years.
Yeah, I'm the same thing. I've been keeping them together all the
sticking
time,
it-
but I figured
yeah.
they'd grow better in a bunch.
And
No,
I'm
yeah,
thinking
you-
the same
all right.
thing.
So the true, you know, because everybody wants that bunch look inside
Yeah.
of your aquarium. That's what looks nice. It's fully grown in and all that. The trick to that is you get the stems in. Let's say you get a pot of 10 stems. You plant them inches apart from each other. You fill in the whole back row, but it looks sparse. You have one plant, one plant, one plant. Then what you do is after they've established for about 2 weeks or so, you come in and you trim the tops off. So if this was your, you know, let's say these were all your plants, you'd come in and you'd snip the top here. And then what you would do is you'd replant the tops in between each of those while leaving the existing stems in place. And then what'll happen is those existing stems, it's much like the mythical beast of the Hydra. When you cut one head off, 2 more will pop up. That's kind of what stems do. So
Hey,
you
that's
cut
my
one off,
favorite.
and
Now I
then
got to buy
stems
some
out.
more.
Yeah, well, so you
Just for that, I'm buying some more.
Yeah, so you have 2 more that sprout off, and then you give them a couple weeks. You wait till they're a couple inches tall, and then guess what? You trim those again, and now those will fork again. So now you'll have off one stem, you'll have 4 heads, possibly more. Sometimes they produce more. It all depends on the plant. But you have 4 stems coming off one initial stem, and then you've also filled in all the area around it with all the new, already converted underwater growth that you have in your tank. So it's already set up for your tank. And eventually what you would do is you take the initial stems, you cut off all the new heads that it's growing, you plant all those, and you toss the old one because eventually it'll get too bare, it'll get too leggy, you'll have a lot of open space. So it all is a matter of how it fills in. But usually after about a month or 2, you could probably toss the original stem and just have all the existing stems that are already now converted to your aquarium and are used to growing there and shouldn't have any melt back. And that's typically what you do. The more you trim it in the beginning, once it's established after about 2 weeks, the better, because now you've produced enough plants that even if 1 or 2 start to die, you usually will have enough to save it, you know.
But see,
I'm
now
usually the other way around. When something's growing, I don't want to touch it, and I let it grow high
Yeah.
and full. And I didn't
like
No,
realize
Val, like
no,
Val,
trimming-
I'm scared to trim Val because I've always been told cutting Val could like cause it to die back.
So trimming plants is actually really good for the plants. The reason being is you got to think in nature, right? Let's say it was growing in a river stream and there was an animal that loves to eat that plant. It'll come over, it'll snack on some of the leaves. Well, now the plant, it sends chemicals from that leaf into the core of the plant saying, uh-oh, we're being attacked. We need to grow more. So what it'll do is it'll actually start producing more growth more quickly, more vigorously, because it wants to survive and it feels like it won't be able to survive. So when you start trimming leaves, and that's not to say trim all your leaves back and have it bare, but doing routine pruning on plants, all plants, not just aquarium plants, is better for the plant because it basically tells it to grow more. It develops better roots, it develops better leaves, and not only that, you're trimming out old leaves. So you're trimming off leaves that have been there for a while that really aren't doing the best for the plant. The newer leaves, the newer growth is typically what you want to have.
Oh man, because I've been scared. This Val has grown so big that it almost wraps around the whole tank like 2 times. But I was like, man, I don't want to cut it because I don't want to die like kill it and whatnot.
No, but valves are a little bit different than normal plants. You don't want to just trim them across. You want to trim it closest to the root mass. So, and you only trim the outer leaves. So it forms in a rosette, basically around, there's a leaf that pops up and then another leaf, then another leaf, and it goes around and around, and it creates a big bush. And you just want to trim the outer leaves closest to the substrate. You want to leave the inner center leaves intact. You don't want to trim across like you were like mowing grass. That's no good for it.
But if it's like this tank is 30 inches high and the valve grows up and across the tank, and I'm like, wow, at what point do I what do you do with it? Like, I didn't want it to wrap all the way around.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, what you can do is little by little trim back the outer leaves. And typically when you trim leaves too, it tells the plant that what it's doing is no good. And it kind of learns from that. So when you trim leaves constantly, the plant will actually try and grow closer and shorter and more compact because it knows that when its leaves get to a certain length, it's getting hurt and it doesn't like that. So it'll start growing shorter and more compact. So that's one way to keep like dwarf sedge and valves in check is trimming constantly.
Welcome, Jean. Brooklyn Blue Jay is watching. She loves H2O plants. Thanks, Jean.
Wow.
Jean she says she needs plants. So, okay, another source. We're gonna shout you out. Keep you in mind, Jean. I got a question. With now, you have a ton of plants behind you. Now, I know you're basically selling most of those. Most of that is inventory. But while you're holding those, I can't help but think those plants are gonna grow to the capacity of that tank. Now, do you trim those and cultivate those, for lack of a better way?
So because we're such a small operation, we really can't cultivate too many plants on our own because we just wouldn't have any supply for people. It would take forever. So we rely on nurseries across the United States and Canada. Actually, we get plants from Tropica, who has a greenhouse in Canada. So we import a lot of those. We deal with local nurseries also in the United States. And, we hold the plants for a little bit and then we ship them out, that kind of thing. There's a couple plants that I can't get anywhere, so I do have to facilitate them. Like dwarf water lettuce is one of them. There's no supplier that has good quality ones, at least that I found. So I grow that myself. And that's why it's so limited. Literally, I'll put, 10 portions up on the website. It sells out in minutes because so many people want it.
I wish I knew. I wish you told me that like months ago. Steve, how much water lettuce did you chuck in the compost?
Right now, my water lettuce is growing like crazy in my pond.
I had so much.
I've given away. I
put it back in there.
I bought 6 plants, and I have to probably given away over 100 already.
At least.
Yeah.
At least.
Water lettuce, frog mitt, and red root.
Water hyacinths. Not the water hyacinths this year. Not as much. I think my koi's eat that a little, but they don't seem to bother the water lettuce. And I actually have a 100-gallon tub on the side of my pond now because it's covered the pond, and I've been giving it away to people.
No,
nice. Man. Yeah, no. If you ever want to make money off your aquarium, red root floaters, frog bed, or dwarf water lettuce, you can sell it all day long.
Yeah,
I tried the red root floaters, but when I grew them outside, they grew in a funny shape. Like it wasn't really tank friendly the way they grew. It didn't grow in like a straight. It grew kind of all wrapped up, and I was like, now it turned me off.
Well, it's a vine, but here's the thing: is that when you grow any plant outside, it's going to be way different than what you're growing inside because it's going to adjust to its outdoor kind of form in a way. Like when you put dwarf water lettuce outside, it'll get to the size of a dinner plate.
Poofy. Yeah, it was poofy.
Yes.
Yeah, and the leaves stick straight up, but in the tank, it's the size of a $50. I mean, sometimes they'll get a little bit bigger, it depends, but they're a lot smaller. The leaves lay flat and that kind of thing. So it all depends on the environment that it's in and how it grows. But when you take it from the outside to put it inside, it will slowly convert back to its inside.
I've tried and I could never get them to do well. Again, you're trying to compete with the sun compared to I don't care what kind of light you put in.
Well, that's because it's used to growing outside, and then you're bringing it inside, and it's shocked.
And they seem to do well in the heat too.
Oh now they exploded.
Yeah, same thing with dwarf water lettuce. All from pretty much from spring until now, it hasn't really grown. But now all of a sudden, my tank used to only have maybe 20 plants in it, and now the whole 40 gallon that I grow them in is completely covered. And I literally just in the last couple of weeks because it's warmed up. The warmer temperature definitely, it's another seasonality thing. When it gets
Yes,
warmer, it
yes.
encourages growth.
One of my cousins that I give plants to, he comes in every 3-4 weeks. He has a house upstate, and he sends me a video of the bears sitting in his pond on their back eating it like it's lettuce,
Oh,
and they're
nice.
taking a bath and they're just eating the water
Yeah.
lettuce.
Well, you know what else a bear does in the woods? He's
Yeah.
doing it in that pond, fertilizing to say the least.
Yeah, right.
Now, Jean has another question. She says you got a
Yeah.
20-gallon tank, a LED shop light. I don't know what spectrum or Kelvin it is, but it's hanging 16 inches above the tank. Ferts with every water change. Only half the plants show growth after running for 2 months. What am I doing wrong? Well, you
So
don't
if
really
it's
say what kind of plants they are
But it's first of all
or what
LED
kind of
shop
light.
light. LED shop light might be running at 2700K, which is not good for most aquatic use. Everybody goes
yeah,
out
the
and buys these cheap things in Home Depot and think that's fine.
Yeah,
yeah,
there's
Not
a
the
most of
lot
first
of
them.
thing
I
them.
know most of them.
yeah, the first thing I would do is check on the bulb and see what rating it
27,
is and make sure it's a
65,
yeah.
you know.
Make sure it's one good for growing plant. But the other thing, if it's hanging above the tank 16 inches, so now you have 16 inches and what? It's a 20-gallon, so you have another, what is that, 12-inch
24,
tall?
24.
24, right?
That's 40 inches to
Oh,
them at the bottom, right?
So it's
24 and
between the
16.
16, yeah.
40
well, if
inches to
it's
the bottom.
yeah, so it's 40 inches to the bottom. So you have a lot of space. So you may want to consider lowering the light maybe 10, 12 inches so it's directly above the aquarium. Because if you have a way up here, or which way is the camera? There you go. If it's way up here and your tank is here, there's no light. You want it to be like right here,
Right.
right on top of it.
What Kelvin rating do you usually have for most of your plants?
So I use LEDs. I don't use any sort of fluorescent tubing.
No, but
So she
even
has
LEDs have a
LEDs.
Kelvin rating.
Yeah. Which one is hold on, I'll tell you what this one is. I use the Fluval 2.0 on it.
Okay, so that's the one
Yeah.
with the full spectrum, the 2.0.
Yeah, it's the full spectrum.
So it has red, green, blue. I don't know if
Yeah,
it actually says what the spectrum is of some of
Well,
those.
the red and the blue, you're going to like 20,000 Ks, where the whites are probably closer to 8 or 10,000 K. So depending on, because you could probably, a lot of fixtures like my saltwater, you can adjust the amount of blue or amount of white you want to come in.
right. I mean, you definitely want it to be full spectrum, and you want it to have the red and the blue, because those
Oh,
are
really?
the
Okay.
colors that the plants use to grow. Let's see, along with white.
I didn't know that. I thought just regular
I
10,000 Ks or something would be
I
fine.
went to a
Well,
6500K full garage light, and that thing was able to shoot, because I told you, your tank is 30 inches deep. The
right.
regular LEDs wouldn't go down that far. So I guess the
Yeah.
reef lights are made to shoot deep, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
most of the freshwater tank lights aren't for, so I've seen some better ones.
Well, it depends on the depth of the tank. That's the thing. Some of these companies, they produce lights, and somebody's trying to put them on a 75-gallon, and it's just not going to work. You need something that's a bit more. But no, the plants use the white light, so that's why you could get ones without the reds and the blues. But the reds and the blues just help to make the plant grow healthier. It provides extra spectrum that they need to grow. So the white light combined with the reds and blues is definitely a good one. Like if you could get one that has all three, it's excellent.
Oh, okay. And you
I
said
didn't
you
realize
used
the
the
plants
Fluval.
needed different spectrums like that.
You used the Fluval with Fluval 3?
I have the 2.0s.
Oh, the 2.0. So that
Yeah.
one has the presettings in it. That's the one with the controller?
No, it doesn't have a
No?
controller. The 3.0 has the controller. This one just has you can dim it and you can turn it into night mode, which don't ever
Oh,
use
okay,
night mode.
which I don't.
And-
For the freshwater,
and-
that's just for us to look at.
Yeah.
Pretty
So you
much.
can't
well,
you can't dim individually the white or the red or blue
no,
ones.
no,
It's all
not with
together.
this,
Yeah.
right? No, yeah,
No.
not with this one.
The new one's more it's like programmable, but
Yeah, the new one is, but
it doesn't say how strong. Like they don't say how strong it is. Like
yeah, because
that's the only gray area.
you need a par meter to figure that out, and it's so difficult to get one of those. They're mad expensive.
They're
Trying to
expensive.
I'm trying to
Bulk
find
Reef
if they have
Supply leases it, but I think you have to put like 100 down, and then you get it back when you send it back. Like they loan it for you
Yeah.
per day. So it just becomes like ridiculous at some point, a little bit.
It's not worth it. The Fluval
Yeah.
lights are great. The Fluval lights are great. The Night Crew lights are great. Asta is another good brand. They're
Nitro,
cheaper
yeah,
brand.
Nitro.
Yeah, Night Crew is good. There's
Very
another
slim.
one. It's called Prism. It's on Nylock G's website. He sells them. It's Prism. Those are more high end, but they are bright. Like those are spotlights. Like you put them over the tank, and it just
So now you use an LED. Most of
Yeah.
us started out fluorescent or incandescent. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
say incandescent because
No, I started out incandescent years ago.
Steve. Don't say. I knew he was gonna.
I'm a little older than you, that's why.
I remember those little fat bulbs and stuff. But now, would you say? And I'm really battling with this. I've been doing two different things on two different tanks: fluorescent versus LED. Which generates the best growth?
it's gonna all come down to the bulb.
Hmm.
There are fluorescent bulbs that are really good, but I think LEDs are just better in general. They're less heat production, they're less energy consumption, and they're usually better at dimming and all that. So I prefer LEDs.
Would you even? We do it a lot. I'm always on both sides of the fence with the saltwater, freshwater. We have ramp up and down, and I think the Fluval. I don't know if the 2 does it. I know the 3 does it. Ramps up and down. Is it worth it? I'm really debating whether it's worth it on the saltwater tank. It's so much of a novelty now to have the ramps, to have them ramp up like sunrise
Yeah.
and ramp down. But then, how much light is the tank actually getting at a focused period of time?
Yeah, so if you have a light that's specifically designed to do that for planted aquariums, they're pretty good. Because ideally, and yet again, this goes into like how in depth you want to get with your tanks. Like mine, my lights come on for 6 hours and they shut off. That's it. Like
That's it.
there's
On,
no
off.
Yeah, on off, and that's it. But the ones that do that have that ramp feature are good because plants do like to wake up. They not just you turn the lights on, they're not ready to absorb all that. They're not ready to absorb all the nutrients, all the CO2 in the water, all that. As soon as the lights kick on, they need a ramp up time. So the lights ramping up like that do help it.
Oh man, because we can get so caught up in things. Let's look at the tanks behind you. Because you have like everything going on behind you. What is going on right behind you? Like what plants are those right there? Because they are like lush green.
Yeah,
our ideal plant growth is right behind you.
Well, particularly behind here, I have some water sprite lace. This is some regular water sprite. I got some pennywort, mint Charlie, some hygro blue, and some Ludwigia ovalis, just in this tank. And then on the other side, if you can see it, this right here is Ludwigia SP Red.
Let me pull you to the
Okay,
front
there you
there.
go. Ludwigia SP Red. This is giant hair grass. I don't know how. Okay. And I have some Ludwigia Dark Red. This one, the light is actually, if I move this light a little bit, you can see a little bit better. There you go. But yeah.
And all of these plants are on h2oplants.com. Shameless plug.
No, thanks.
That hair grass is another one that I've kind of fought with.
Yeah.
I think I damage it when I pull the the cotton, the fiber off of the roots because it's such a delicate plant. If I'm holding it like grass, I don't know if I'm wrecking it apart.
Right. Yeah. So typically with that particular one, I tell people just plant it all together.
Okay.
Because like when you're pulling it apart, you can damage it. And then I think it's just better to just let it do its thing. This is Vivipara, so this actually produces offspring at the top of its leaves that you can actually pull off and replant, which is a cool feature of it. And then they have other versions of hair grass, which I don't think I have any. And no, it doesn't look like I have any of the thick leaf one.
Now, that is like a shop light. That is like a regular light over that tank with the hair grass.
No, these are the Fluval 2.0s.
Oh, the Fluvals. That's a pretty clean.
What size tanks are those?
These are 40 gallons. So they're
40.
actually, so there's a tank up here and then there's a tank down below, and they kind of cycle through each other. So
Oh, wow.
the top tank drains to the bottom comes back up. There's no filters on them.
Like a
The
sump.
way
Like a
I,
sump.
yeah, basically a
Pretty
sump.
much.
The way I filter it is with lava rock inside the
Oh,
overflow.
okay.
So the overflow flows down,
Bio.
hits the lava rock, and there you go.
Very interesting. Very sounds like another project, Steve.
Yeah.
I can hear his wheels turning from here.
Well, my ideal situation is if we ever do get a warehouse, I want to redo this where there's an electric solenoid valve that is on a timer that will, when the water's coming through the overflow pipe, it will close so it can't drain into the tank, and then it'll actually drain out into a either a barrel or directly into like the sewers, and then have water automatically coming in off the top to refill it. So it's kind of like an automatic water change system.
Just a full recirculating system. Just
Exactly.
all enclosed.
Yeah, or possibly just doing just a slow drip method where the overflow will eventually go to the the sewer or the waistline, whatever.
Yeah, and the Facebook user is saying the lava rock is money, but I've definitely got my lava rock from Home Depot.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
not ashamed to say I bought the 20
What do you mean, the lava
pound
rock like
bag.
they use it in a barbecue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not it's
Same thing. Okay.
there's one that they have for the barbecue that's black. And then they have I think it's like a garden type regular 20
A red
pound bag of lava rock.
I use the stuff that's for the barbecue. I just got a bag of it.
Okay, I didn't know you can do that. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that and it's
20 pound
great
bag.
filter media.
I've actually used the my Carib Sea puts out like a coral rubble, they call it.
Yeah,
And I've used that in my pond too. It looks something like lava rock too. It seems to have a lot of pores, a lot of surface area on it too. I'm sure it's a little more money than lava rock, but it seems to work pretty good in my pond.
yeah.
So now let's see. Nano Aquarium guy says, do you have narite snails or shrimp or anything else in your planted tanks or any of your other tanks there?
So in some of the tanks, we have some snails like ram's horn snails. Some of them have Malaysian trumpet snails, which are like the best snails for planted aquariums. There's no shrimp anymore. We used to have shrimp, but it just became a hassle of having to have the shrimp, so we don't have those. I do have some algae eaters that are the Siamese algae eaters that I think are really great for planted aquariums. If you have,
They don't bother the plants.
Yeah, if you have anything over a 20 gallon, they're great. And those I have. And then in a couple of the things, I have some fish. Like I have an angelfish that I'm looking at directly in front of me, and some Harlequin rasboras and stuff like that. But those were like rescue fish, basically. Like if somebody messages me and is like, "Hey, can you take my fish?" If I have room, I normally take them.
Do you have any inverts that you would not recommend for plants because they eat the plants or whatever, or bother them, or any type of snails or inverts?
No, pretty much snails are fine. Even pond snails, they get a bad rap, but typically bladder snails or pond snails, they don't eat healthy plant matter. They only eat decaying plant matter. So, which is actually a good thing because you want it broken down quickly. If a plant is losing a leaf or something, you don't want it sitting there. And most of the time, with the exception of, I think apple snails, I think are the ones that do it. Those are the ones that eat leaves.
That eat the leaves. I made that mistake. And they multiply quickly.
I have trapdoor in my pond. They don't seem to bother anything.
They multiply
trapdoors
quick.
are good. Yeah, ram's horn snails are good. Bladder snails are good. Malaysian trumpet snails, rabbit snails, those are all fine. Just the apple snails, I think, are the only ones. Narite snails are great. Mystery snails are great too. It's just, with the exception of the apple snails, all the other snails, they'll only eat decaying plant matter, which is ideal for your aquarium because they actually break it down quicker. So it allows your bacteria and your substrate and your filter to quickly process it quicker than normal. And like it's the same thing with seed shrimp. If you don't have shrimp, I love seed shrimp. They're great. They help process things quick too. Like the microorganisms, the Tritus worms are great. These you want to. A lot of people, they don't like snails, they don't like worms, they don't like these things because kind of it's icky. People think it's gross, but you have to realize you have a ecosystem in a box, and you want it to be as much of an ecosystem as possible. So that's why I try to use as much natural things as
Okay.
possible.
Right.
Do you recommend quarantining plants?
So I'm of the mindset I don't do it, and it's probably not the best practice. It really depends.
Me too, because I'm lazy though.
Yeah, and me, I'm one of those, like, I'll handle whatever happens. Like, if I have an algae outbreak, I will handle it. If it's, whatever, I don't really care. If Hydra comes in on plants, I don't care. I'll deal with it. Like, there's medication you can dose. If planaria comes in, I'll dose. Like, there's just stuff and how to treat it. It's not the end of the world. But with that said, is if you have tanks that are huge tanks, like 100 gallons, you don't want to be bothered with dealing with that stuff if it became a problem, right? Because there's such large tanks that it's going to require so much money and time to deal with it, that's just not worth it. If it's a small little 5 or 10 gallon, it's not that big a deal. You could deal with it relatively easily. So I do tell people, look, if you are one of those people that don't want snails or don't want worms or anything like that, which is completely fine. And when I first started, I didn't want snails either because I didn't know about them. I didn't know the benefits of them, and I thought they were weird and creepy too. I didn't want them, but I recommend, like, definitely quarantine, rinse them off. We actually, so with every order that we ship out comes this little brochure thing that we ship out, and it has information having to do with each plant. On the back is how to do dips of, like, bleach or alum, which is a pickling spice, or potassium pergramate, which is another one. It's actually like a pool sanitizing liquid that they use, or something like that. That has all the instructions on it, which is good. Like, it's a good practice to get into if you quarantine your plants or dip them, sterilize them in a sense. But some plants can't handle the sterilization process, so. But if you have, like, an extra tank, it would be good to do that with, if you have the space.
Because then we worry about what can you treat the tank with to kind of deal with your plants that won't harm the fish, or vice versa.
Right.
Like, okay, especially shrimp. Like, I've kind of gone to completely using pond water for water changes in the cube, because I've had such bad luck with tap water. I've had, like, Kabamba completely drop every needle with, like, one water change, but I could take pond water and put right in there and no problem.
I
don't know what to treat the tank with. Like, to get rid of snails, I had 10,000 ramshorn snails, which was, oh my God. Somebody did a great thing and hooked me up, and the plants were awesome, but I had 10,000. It probably took me 4 or 5 months to get them out of the tank.
So snails are not easy to get rid of sometimes.
What could I treat the tank with, or whether
botillas eat them? Those are good.
I put about 5 coolie loaches in there.
I've got the big, what they call the yo-yo loaches, and they just devour them. They love them.
Oh my God. But
I've actually had a 10-gallon tank with so many snails one day. I took the whole tank apart and cleaned it. I was young at this time, years ago. I put the tank back together. I put some gravel. I put some fish in. The snails came back.
They come back because they lay the egg. The eggs are transparent. I didn't realize
the eggs are clear. You don't see them.
And they stick to anything.
Yep. I thought fresh water would have killed them all. Nope.
The easiest way to deal with snails, though, is stop feeding so much. You're probably overfeeding your tank if they're exploding in population.
Okay.
So even though they eat, scraps of food on the ground, they eat the dying matter, you can control the amount of food that you're feeding. So if you're feeding too much, snails will usually explode in population. That's a sign that, hey, maybe not feed so often,
Yeah, and I ended up getting a snail trap, and I was putting Hikari sinking pellets in the snail trap and pulling it out every night. It was like I was going fishing every night.
Yeah, that's another good one. The other way you deal with snails too that I've done in the past is you take a piece of cucumber or zucchini, put it on a fork or anything that'll hold it down, and you stick it in the tank right before the lights go off, because typically snails are more active at night. Not all the time, but most of the time. And then if you come back in the morning when the lights turn on, or when you first wake up, you go back to the tank, all the snails will be on the zucchini. You take it out, you toss that, and rinse and repeat
Do it
until
again. Yeah.
until you don't see any snails.
Oh man, what a nightmare! I feel like I'm having a flashback just thinking about those snails. So yeah, plants are quite interesting. I definitely compare, even though they're not coral. They're not coral, and and plants are way different in many ways. But the science behind the setup is so similar. What is the hardest plant that you've ever had to deal with, like trying to grow? Like, what would you say is a plant that's commonly sold that beginners should probably shy away from?
That is a good question.
For me, it was Crips until your speech, and I'm giving you all the credit because I was like, "Is this thing dead?" I was so fed up with those Crips, but then they would come back. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's Crips have that melting thing. I mean, there's plants that used to give me trouble that don't give me trouble anymore. I had to take them out back and show them what's up.
whoa, is that a PETA violation?
Yeah, right.
Well, it's like Carl learning what that plant needs and what you're doing wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or just giving it time. Sometimes like I have however many tanks I have in here. Let's just say 20. One tank might be good for growing one plant, and then the other tank might not be, and it's just from subtle differences. Some tanks have different substrate than others.
Yeah.
Some have 2 lights versus 1. Some are directly in a window that get direct sunlight that makes plants grow even better. So like, it's all these little things that can attribute to why a plant doesn't grow. So I mean, I just I let it do what it does, kind of thing.
Have you ever had purple waffle? You know the plant purple waffle that I see? I didn't realize it wasn't an aquarium plant.
Yeah, I was just about to say it's not an aquarium
I kept
plant.
seeing it in aquarium shops, and I bought it one day and I put it on Facebook. Thank you, Facebook. I'm not. Everybody will say D is always like not anti-social media, which is contradiction. But I put it on social media, and they was like, "Take that out of your tank, it's poison." I was like, "What? Purple waffle?"
Yeah. No, purple waffle is definitely not an aquarium plant. It is a marginal plant. So the thing about it is, it can grow underwater briefly. And I've gotten people that message me and say, "Oh, I've had purple waffle for years in my tank." I'm like, well, that's great. Like I said in the beginning, anybody can grow anything. It's just the plants adapt to whatever they're given. So some plants will adapt better than others, and they could be the same plant, just different strain of that plant possibly. But purple waffle is not an aquarium plant. You can't grow it underwater typically, for the most part. But it's a beautiful plant. So if you have like a planter above your tank, like a lot of people do, and they'll pipe up to it and have water flowing through it, you could grow it in the back of that. You could put a pot that is halfway submerged in the water, and you can plant it in that and allow it to grow up out of the water, similar to like pothos and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's things that you could do with marginal plants, but traditionally a lot of big box pet stores will sell marginal plants as aquarium plants, and they're not. They can only be submerged for so long before they die back.
And of course, they never tell you that.
No,
because
most
they get
people
them in
don't
and they
know.
look pretty. They look pretty when you first. It was a beautiful full plant, and I never seen that color. But then I got it home and I was like, "Oh, look! I just bought this great plant." They were like, "Oh, no, take it out! You got like 2 days left before it dies." And I was like, "Oh God." I
had an incident with one supplier that I used to use, a pretty reputable supplier too, that's well known nowadays. They had a full aquarium plant list of all that, and they had a bunch of plants on there, and there was like these cool plants that I've never seen before. I was like, "Oh, let me order these." I don't know anything about them. I wanted to give them a try. I got them in. Well, it turns out the more research I did on them, and I had to dig deep on the interwebs to find it, but they were actually marginal plants that the supplier itself was selling as aquarium plants. I'm like, these aren't aquarium plants, they're marginal plants. And had I known that, I probably wouldn't have ordered them, because I really don't have a setup for marginal plants. So but lessons learned. Even I learned lessons. So
anyone that doesn't know, there's a little picture of the purple waffle.
Hold on, let me put it in the big screen. Hold it right there. I'll put it up.
Yeah.
Because it's a really pretty plant.
Pretty looking plant, yeah.
But
It
nobody.
is.
Oh wait, there you go. Now we can see it. But
Yeah.
they'll never tell you that you'll probably have it for maybe a week,
Yeah.
or maybe you luck out. Maybe you luck out. You know.
Yeah. That's true.
Um,
You never know.
I'm back.
but it was so funny that
We missed you.
stores and Joe's back.
Welcome back.
Stores are so quick to sell um, immersed plants or emerged plants with submerged plants, and how do you tell the difference? Like, you really, if you don't know going in. I mean, I always walk now that technology is what it is. They'll see me in the store saying, "Hey Google, what is so and so and so
Yeah,
plant?"
Yeah. That
Like, and they're like, "Well, who you?" Oh, my phone just cut on. Sorry, phone. It's so
No.
used to me.
But if you look in
Like,
stores, a lot of people do that, especially in pet stores. They're always Googling something to find out about it. Because half the time you ask them in the store and they don't know.
and they'll sell you a plant, and you don't know why you killed it. Like,
Exactly.
Nano
Yeah.
Aquarium guy says he had that luck with bobitis. Bobitis, I thought was kind of a hard plant too. I thought it was a hard plant, and I gave up on it because I couldn't find it in good shape when I bought it. Unless I
Right.
bought it, you didn't bring it to the show.
I don't think I
I,
did. No.
I think somebody grew it. Somebody was growing it. But
Yeah.
since we haven't met in person, everybody's out of touch now. But
Right.
bobitis is a plant that gives you issues. Like, as soon as you put it in a tank, other than testing the water that you get it from, I don't know how to tell whether a plant is going to do good. Like, if I bought the plants you had in the bag, what I've started doing with coral too, shout out for you guys that are saltwater, I've definitely started testing the water that I get the coral in before I put it in my
Well,
tank.
that's even with fish because in coral tanks, most of our reef tanks we keep at 1.024, 25, 26. A lot of fish stores keep their things as low as like 0.01, 19, 18, because the lower it is, the less chance of you getting parasites. But when you're quarantining something, that's a big difference. And it's not just float the bag for a few minutes and put a little water. It takes a lot to get those parameters equal.
And now, I guess, would you say we should probably be doing that with plants? I mean, I don't know. What do you keep your parameters at? I mean,
So that's the thing. I don't really check my parameters. I grow what I can grow in my tanks. I don't worry about, what's my KH at, or anything like that. I don't worry about pH. I don't check nitrogen. I don't check any of that.
Temperature?
The plants. Temperature is
well, now it's
at the room
99 degrees. Now
Well,
it's like
right
80
now-
degrees on it.
I have a little sensor hanging up there. Right now I'm at 69 degrees here in the basement.
Where
'cause
are
I
you
only have the
located?
ACs going. I'm in
It's
New
in
Jersey.
Jersey.
In New Jersey. Okay.
Yeah.
But Jersey, again, has very hard water. I mean, if you put
Yeah.
CDS meter Jersey, you'll get 350 to 400 out of it. You come in New York and we get like 40. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a big difference in water. So, again, going from that to that, I know on fish, you got to be careful. Would plants be the same thing where you have to
Yeah.
acclimate them and stuff?
So plants. So here's the thing: when you buy a new plant, it doesn't matter where you buy it from. It could be your neighbor. It could be somebody across the country. When a plant is moved from its initial environment that it was used to growing in and put into a new environment, it is going to go into shock. It just, no matter what it is, because when a plant grows a leaf or grows a stem, it's used to growing in that particular environment with those levels of whatever it has, Ka, pH, nitrogen levels, all that is specific to that environment. The light levels, you could, just for example, if you took your light and all of a sudden you raise it up 6 inches, your plants will go into shock because it's not used to that difference of light. And you change nothing else about the tank. It's just that you raise the light or you dim the light. So these are things that can affect it. So traditionally what happens is, and it kind of goes back to bobitis, when you take a plant and you put it in a new aquarium, it's going to go into shock. It's going to lose leaves. It's going to lose stems. It's going to melt. That's the natural process because it wasn't grown in that environment. Now, what you're looking for is the new growth that, excuse me, the new growth that is set up for your tank. And hopefully the plant will melt slower. My lights just went out. The plant will melt slower than it grows. So it will actually have growth that is faster. And that is traditionally what will happen with most plants. is that the new growth will pop up quicker than it has a chance to melt, but not always the case. So if you look at this rotala here, it's a little hard to see, but this rotala has little tiny leaves at the top, but down here has these big round leaves. Yeah, there we go. So
There we go.
without being in water, it's a little hard to tell, but it has these little tiny leaves at the top here. Those are underwater growth, and the rest of this is above water growth. This was all grown out in the nursery in high humidity, but the top of the plant, and it changes dramatically. You could tell it more in person, but the top 2 inches here are all grown in the water. And then like I have this dwarf 4-leaf clover, which I'll show you. So this is how the plant comes to us, right? It has these big tall leaves that are about say 4 to 6 inches, right? So what a lot of people don't realize is this isn't the underwater growth. These little tiny guys right here is the underwater growth that's growing there along the side of it. So you have this that comes to us, and then this is what it looks like before we traditionally ship it out, or at least we make sure it has some of this underwater growth. And you can see the tops are turning yellow because those leaves were grown above the water. They're not used to underwater growth, and nor are they the underwater version. Because here's the one deciding factor, too, when it comes to immersed plants versus submerged plants. For a plant to grow up out of the water, it has this outer membrane that's almost like the cuticle on your fingernail. So what happens is when a plant's growing above water, it has this membrane that surrounds the leaf that holds in the water. Because without it, it would just dry out. And that's why if you take an aquarium plant and you hold it outside the water for about 5 minutes with no moisture content, whatever hitting it, you'll see it start to shrivel. Because when a plant is growing underwater, its leaves lose that membrane. It loses that cuticle that holds the water in, because it basically allows the cells to have water moving freely between the aquarium and the plant itself. And that is one key determination of how do you know if a plant is immersed grown or not, is you take it out of the water and let it sit there for a couple minutes. If it starts to shrivel up and die and dry out, you know it's a truly submerged grown plant. If it just sits there and it doesn't shrivel up or dry out, and you'll tell, like the leaves will start to curl on themselves. It'll start getting brittle. Some of the leaves could even break if they are out of water for too long, because they become like paper, basically. That's one key way to know if a plant is submerged or not grown. But if you get a plant that, say, like when we get them in from the nursery, and we put them in the water, we know that those are aquarium plants, but they won't dry out right away because they were grown above the water typically. So they have that membrane there that holds in the water, so they won't immediately dry out. It's not until they've been underwater for some time that they have the underwater growth that will keep them from drying out, or make them dry out. Like I have the plants right now in this bucket of water because I know if I don't, they will dry out. Like they literally can't be out of water more than a couple minutes.
Right. It's funny when you were saying that, when you first get a plant, you're going to lose stuff on it. Most people would panic right away and say, "Oh, my plant's dying. It's not normal." And I know I would. And like, what's going on? Why is everything falling off?
And that's the worst thing you can do. Let me just show this sword here. So this sword we've had in our tanks for a while, and you can actually see here that there is this leaf right here that is just dead. It's mush, it's melting, it's dying back. I could pluck that off, right? That's no good, and that's traditionally what you want to do. But I'm not worried about that one leaf. Here's another one that just came off. I'm not worried about that leaf because I have all these new growths in the middle. You can see the red. Right. That's a new growth. And on top of that, the reason why I know this plant is doing so well is because it also has all these babies growing off of it. This is a stave. This is traditionally how most sword plants reproduce. If this was grown above the water, it would be flowers, but because it's grown under the water, they're actual plants. And now each one of these can become a whole new sword plant. But I know that this plant is doing just fine because of that. Now, if you had this plant in your aquarium and it wasn't making babies, that's not to say it isn't good, but what you want to do is you want to start plucking off all these older leaves that I'm pulling off here, all these mushy leaves, because they're not doing anything for the plant. But it has all this new growth, so that's what you're looking for. You want to pay more attention to new growth than the old growth. The old growth will eventually die. It's just natural. These leaves This is an underwater leaf that fell off. This is grown under the water. It's just an old leaf. We've had this plant in for quite some time. That's the reason why it's growing babies, because it's been in here for a couple months.
Oh. So now, do you have any other low light plants that would be good, like Anubias or Java fern for like a beginner?
Yeah, we have tons of Anubis. We have Java ferns. Give me 1 second. My phone is going to die, so I just want to make sure it doesn't die. No, hold on. I have a whole setup here with wires, and
Welcome to the aquatic experience.
yeah, right.
If you don't have like 50 wires, you're
There
not
you
keeping
go.
aquariums.
Well, I I told you on my webcam I couldn't find my webcam, so I was trying to get this going
You'll
here.
find it tomorrow. It's next to the Pop Tarts and stuff like that.
Yeah, the kids probably put it somewhere. So yeah, so like 90% of I would even say probably 95% of all the plants we sell on our website are beginner friendly. Like we don't. It came down to when I first started, within the first couple of years of selling plants and all that, I determined that there was a higher demand for the easier plants. I can get the really rare plants and I can sell them for $50, for this much plant, and that's great. But there's not a lot of demand for that stuff. So we sell a lot of beginner friendly plants. One plant that is really beginner friendly that I recommend everybody should give it a try is this guy right here. It's bucephalandrid. So it actually comes in many different shapes, sizes, and colors. I have another one here if I can find it.
Oh, his phone just conked out. I think we lost
Did we
him.
go over on the live room? We're now in 36 minutes now.
I think we lost him. He just went out. But anyway, to check out Justin, check him out at h2oplants.com, member of the Brooklyn Aquarium Society and longtime supporter. I'm going to put the link here.
Very good talk. I mean, we actually learned a lot of things from just a few minutes from him,
He's just
there he goes. He's not. He's not.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
He's back.
My phone closed out.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Technical difficulties.
We thought we were cut off because we're going an hour and 37 minutes, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of information.
All right. Yeah, I'll show you this one last one real quick, and then we can.
So that's bucephalandrid.
Open his screen up, David.
Yeah.
Bucephalandrid.
Yeah,
Let me go.
Bucephalandrid. So it comes in different shapes and sizes. This is a bigger leaf boost. This is a smaller leaf boost. They come in all different color shapes, leaf sizes, and all that.
And what is it?
It's called bucephalandrid. There's all these different sizes and shapes. All have different names. I don't have them labeled though, so I don't really know what them are. So you can call it bucephalandrid A, bucephalandrid B.
That looks
There's
a little like
rarer
Java
types
that
out
one,
there. I mean,
Well,
it's more so Anubis.
A rhizome? Is that like a rhizome type plant, like a Anubis?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a lot like Anubis. It has a rhizome. It grows in mats like this. You could glue this on rocks or driftwood. This is a single rhizome here. Some of them grow in like clumps, but this has a single stem there. And basically, you can put this on rocks, driftwood, hardscape, really anything that it can latch onto, because it's a vine essentially, and it'll grow. And some of them have different colors like purples, blues, pinks, oranges, yellows, colors that you don't traditionally see, and they're really easy to grow. They don't need a lot. Literally, you can just stick them in somewhere and they'll be fine. And they're really, really nice and beautiful. I definitely recommend them for beginners to give them a try. It'll give you some interesting types of plants to look at.
How expensive are small plants like that of that type?
Traditionally, we sell 2 clumps this size for $15.
That's
so yeah, and then we have like ones that I think it's $10 for like 3 small pieces like this.
Not bad at all. Yeah.
And you get a variety. We don't label them because we don't know which types they are really. We just get them from the nurseries that we work with, and they just come in big baskets of all different kinds and shapes. So we just we pick whatever looks good, and then that's what we send out.
And
actually, a few people have been saying they bought from you already like this.
Yeah, great quality. He says it was great quality. He posted in the comments there.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Now, actually, before we get into anything, I'm going to make sure I remember to share your site before I get my senile moment. If I forget.
Oh,
'Cause I
Too
have-
late.
that.
Too late. Oh no. I figured. Next time I'll be putting my shoes on the wrong feet again. So yeah, this is because I was typing it wrong for the longest. H2oplants.com with a little O, not the number 0 like I was doing for like 50 years. But
Yeah.
everything has the
A lot of people
fertilizers
make
on
that
there.
mistake.
Oh, for oxygen.
I was doing it.
Not
I
O.
was doing it.
Not zero.
Just ask Google, everybody. Everybody knows Google's smarter than most of us. We don't know what we're doing. I just search it on Google and you find it. He carries a lot of tropica, which are the horticulture, those cultured plants, plants for fancy people. Or as you can
Yeah, we
see
actually have
behind him, he
another
has a
batch of them
large
coming in.
supply. Oh yeah, they're coming in.
Yeah.
That
Next
I'm
week we should
always
have,
I'm always
a
scared. I'm always
new
scared of those
shipment.
plants. I rather the plants like I see them in your tank and I know that they're growing under like the conditions that I'm familiar with. Those cultured plants they're kind of intimidating to me.
They can be, but they're pretty. Most of them are pretty good. At least the ones that I carry usually are in pretty good shape. So, I think they're usually fine.
And you got various plant packages on here. Care, actually, what I like is instructions on care and things like that for the plants, which definitely for most of us, we find out we've been doing things wrong for years. You can never be in a hobby a long time and not realize your own mistakes.
Well, you're always
If you
learning.
think
Because things change all the time. They find out new things that we didn't know. I mean, I've been doing this since I'm 10. I'm 60 now, 50 years, and I'm still learning constantly. Whether
Oh,
it's
yeah.
freshwater,
Yeah, it's
saltwater,
ever-evolving.
ponds, whatever. It's always something new. The lighting, the
Definitely,
equipment,
yeah.
everything's changed dramatically.
now, wait a minute.
I
Now,
got
here's something
one
did
question I
see.
wanted to bring up
Go
to
ahead.
Justin about the plants. Well, actually, two things. On the bulbitis, I had bulbitis in my 30-gallon. It was a guppy tank. I had uh, what was that? Echo Complete was the substrate I used, and I always kept in a few coral pieces, like clam shells or coral pieces. And I tell you, the bulbitis took off. It took over more than half the tank. It was great.
Right.
So the recommendation would be add something that will make the water a little harder, such as coral,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Because if it works for the
bulbitis-
guppies, it'll work for that.
Yeah.
Just specify
bulbitis is
dead coral,
grown
not
in-
live coral.
No, yeah. Don't make that mistake.
People be at the
No,
reef shop.
bulbitis is traditionally a harder water plant, like Anubis and Java fern, also like harder water. So it does definitely help having clam shells or reef rock or any of that stuff to raise the pH, the KH or any of that is good. And bulbitis is a slow grower, so you won't realize that it's gonna, how much it affects it because it grows so slow that subtle changes take a while for it to be fully realized.
It was a great plant. One other question I had for you. I had a bare bottom tank that I had African cichlids in.
Right.
So the water was high in alkaline. Somebody suggested I put it in clay pots with gravel in it and dirt, and it should do fine. However, when I did this after, I don't know, maybe a month or 2 or 3, I noticed that some of the fish started to die. And I took the
That could be
giant,
a problem.
it was giant Valsneria. When I took that out, I actually smelled like it smelled bad. So I don't know if the roots were bad or something, because it affected the water quality, and the fish were actually dying off from it, which I thought was kind of strange in a clay pot.
Well, so the clay pot, the one thing to note about those is you want to make sure they weren't treated with anything. Sometimes they have a glazing or a sealant on them. That could have been what it was.
Oh, okay.
You want to make sure that they're untreated, like literally that they're just terracotta and they're untreated, because some of them do have chemicals on them, which would leach out over time. That could be one thing. The plant could have also possibly been rotting and spiked your ammonia. That could possibly be another case if it wasn't doing well. If it was one plant in a large tank, probably not. It wouldn't have spiked it enough. But if you had a lot of
I think I had about 4 or 5 of them in there, and giant val, and they were big plants.
it probably wouldn't have been enough. Like if you have like a tank like I have, like that was shown earlier with the light on, if you have a tank like that and all of a sudden stuff starts to die, your ammonia is going to go through the roof because there's just so much rot and decay. But if you have, you know, a couple plants scattered, it's minimal in a big tank. Like it's not, it shouldn't raise it too much. I honestly might have been the pots themselves.
Could have been. Could have been,
yeah,
right.
That's
I didn't think
potentially a thing.
about that.
Yeah, whenever I
Never thought
recommend
that as the
terracotta
pots.
pots to people, yeah.
Never thought
Because
of the
terracotta
pots
pots are
as a
great
thing.
for yeah, they're great for goldfish tanks or cichlid tanks to house plants in. Like you could plant the Panchaton, that big one that I showed you with the flower. You could plant those in those and have them in with those fish without having to have substrate at the bottom that they can mess up. But you have to make sure that the pots aren't treated with anything.
Yeah, I've had that rotting. I've had that rotting problem. I mean, one of the things I noticed that heavily aerating the water definitely helps. I've been aerating the water at night. I'm setting the pumps to aerate the water at night because I had that.
That's actually
smell.
a good thing.
I had that smell a long time ago, and I didn't know what it was, and it was those bulbs had squished, they turned to squish, and they were under the dirt. I forgot they were there because they died down and they would come back up, but I wasn't taking them out. So now I'm gonna get into the habit of, like you said, putting them. I put them in a Ziploc bag with soil, like at the end of this season, and put it in a cold place. I mean, I was leaving it outside, but you know, I don't know if freezing would be a problem. People have told me too to buy the bulbs and to put them in a refrigerator for a couple of days and then take them out. I don't know if that made any sense or not.
I've never done it in the fridge. Then again, I don't really buy not sprouted bulbs, so I try to stay away from that. You know. But, yeah, no, definitely.
This is hard water. Thanks. All right, so the questions have slowed down. Let me see. I want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Yeah, boat is nice. Yeah, the water was thanks. Yeah, great. A lot of information we got tonight.
Right.
We saw some
Justin,
beautiful plants.
Thank you for taking your time out on a Friday night like this to spend time with us and educate our members. And David, always thank you to you for putting all this together. You know, sometimes we forget about that too. But
right.
David spends a lot of time.
Did you notice I've adjusted the light so you can't see the gray?
I noticed that. Sure.
Thank you,
I could still. You can't see mine.
No, I can't see.
Joe, we can see yours.
Just one other thing I wanted to mention for those of you that may not know. I have a discount code for your aquarium group it's BAS10. It saves 10% off any order from your group. So if anybody ever wants to order, and it's lifetime. Here. It's not just a single use. So
post that up on our webpage, Sammy David.
Sounds good.
I'm gonna post it up. Yes, sirree.
And what was it again?
Yeah,
BAS10.
It's BAS10. Yeah, 10% off any order all the time. Like it's exclusive to your group. So feel free.
Terrific.
All right, I'm posting it up right now.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. And another thing that I recently did, I haven't really advertised it much, but just so those of you watching or later on, we recently changed kind of how we did things. Now, any order that somebody places that's one plant, they get a free plant. They get a selection of a free plant. So you order one, you get one free, no matter what your order is. So.
Wow,
and 10% off. What a deal!
For you lonely-hearted planters.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, believe it or not, some people, we try. The way I tried to structure it is that, if somebody just wants one plant, I want them to be able to order just one plant. Some people have minimums that you have to order, $50 or $30 or something. I just, if somebody only needs one plant, I want them to be able to get that one plant. So,
right.
That's
I
try as easy
same thing with fish. There's certain
everybody.
things you can order online with fish, and some of the sites will be $150, $200 minimum. Not everybody wants to spend that.
Exactly.
It's kind of like a buffet. If you want to test the plant out to see how it does in your tank, you order one.
Yeah.
because now
Yeah.
I'm not costing a small fortune. I'm ordering one. I'm going to try it out. Heck, if it works, I'm going to buy a dozen or so more.
Right.
Right,
That's a great
exactly.
idea.
Yeah. So
Good.
so we have that, but then
Well,
you
I'll be
get you
using
buy one plant, you get one free. So
Wow.
and
Love
we
it.
also I
Sounds like a
actually
deal.
made crypt flamingos, that one of the free plants, so you could get some crypt flamingos.
Cool.
Which are-
I gotta try the crypt
Yeah.
again. I did good for such
They're-
a deep tank, but I think I've conquered my fear. I think so. It's, oh man,
Well-
some plants you just struggle with, and then some plants you
Yep.
are tired. It's like that coral. Like you want that hard to get coral, but you know it's a 50-50.
No,
Yeah.
better than
Crypts
that.
are so
Okay.
rewarding.
Well, dead coral.
Well,
I have
it's
had dead
90-10.
coral for years, and it never dies again. It dies once,
And then, like
you
I
leave
said,
it alone.
then some
and
plants
it
you can't
stays there.
stop them from growing, like water lilies. You know.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
I
Well,
just gave
yeah.
Joe some too, right, Joe?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've
Wow.
killed many things in my life. Trust me. Plants, fish,
Well,
Spirits.
but
Hopes and
unfortunately, that's how you
dreams.
learn. You know,
hopes and dreams. Right.
as long as you're not killing the same thing over and over again, it means you're learning, you're correcting your ways. You know, and like I said, we've all been keeping fish and stuff for a long time. Plants, you try to learn what you're doing wrong. You know,
Right.
again, new
You know
equipment
what they
comes out,
say,
new
tr-
information comes out. But the great thing today is the internet. You can go and search anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of stuff on the internet is incorrect.
It's not.
So you really,
So-
you got to really be
Well,
careful.
Absolutely. You know, I never forget one time years ago, I went to search how to drill a tank. And the guy has this whole video on drilling a tank. And in the middle of the video, he cracks the tank. And he goes, Oh, I
Nice.
guess I got to get another tank. I'll see you next video. Like, why would you leave that on? Why would you leave that on?
Well,
To show us what not to do?
I actually had a live I had a live stream that I did a couple years back when we were first setting up the fish room. It went viral on Facebook because I was drilling a tank for the first time and everybody wanted to see if I'd crack it or not. I'm like, wow, you just
know what
wanna
I
watch
found
and
over
see
the
if I
years?
fail.
I've drilled a lot of tanks over the years. When I found out, and I found out from Joe, the thinner the glass, the harder it is to drill. Like I had no problems drilling
Oh,
90s,
yeah.
150s. I drill a 5-gallon tank for Joe and I crack it.
Many times.
It's
well,
that
Justin,
5
you
gallons
didn't
is
learn-
so
He didn't
thin.
learn from his mistake.
Shout out your YouTube channel. I forgot. Shout out your YouTube channel real
Oh.
quick because he has
Oh.
tons of videos on the YouTube channel.
Oh, that's a great
Yeah,
idea.
it's H2O plants. I mean, I haven't posted in a while, but I have a lot of backlog of videos that showcase most of the plants we sell and tell you a little bit about them. And I'll eventually get back to making videos. I've just been super busy with another business venture, so I haven't had time.
But
So
Justin also has a lot of care videos, like how to care for certain species. I know I've been following him for a long time.
Yeah.
I've been following him before we met at the club, actually. But thank you once again. We're going on. We're almost hitting 2 hours, fellas. Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
this
That
is
was-
one of the longest we've done.
This is a lot of information.
Thanks
Check
again,
out
Dave.
this is where I
H2O
start to
products.
charge.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs.
Everybody-
Powerbosh, wherever you are.
All right.
Thank you,
Everybody have a
everybody.
good night.
It was
Have a
wonderful.
good
Thank you.
night.
Appreciate
Any
it.
questions?
Thanks, guys.
Check out the website. Check out the Facebook channel. Check out YouTube. Be kind to each other. Learning, sharing is caring, and you're never too old to learn. And with that, I'm going to go zip
Definitely.
to the exit.
Later.